My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a janitor at County General Hospital in Pennsylvania. Well, I used to work there. I quit 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to process what happened during my last overnight shift in the morgue. I know what you're thinking. A morgue janitor? That's got to be the creepiest job ever, right? Honestly, it wasn't that bad for the most part. I'd been doing it for almost 2 years, and you get used to it surprisingly fast. The pay was decent, the hours were flexible since I was taking online classes during the day, and most importantly, I worked alone. As someone with pretty bad social anxiety, that was actually a huge plus for me. For context, County General is this massive hospital built in the 1970s. The morgue is in the basement, which makes sense, I guess, and it's pretty isolated from the rest of the building. You have to take this service elevator down, and there's a long hallway before you even get to the morgue entrance. The morgue itself has the main examination room, a smaller office for the pathologist, a storage room for supplies, and of course the refrigeration unit where they keep the bodies. There's also this weird auxiliary hallway that connects to the old crematorium, which hasn't been used since the early 2000s when they built a newer facility off-site. My shift was always 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. The work itself was pretty straightforward. I'd mop the floors, disinfect all the surfaces, take out the biohazard waste, restock supplies, and basically make sure everything was clean and organized for the day shift. The pathologist, Dr. Chen, was this nice older woman who'd sometimes still be there when I arrived if she had a late autopsy. She'd always chat with me for a few minutes before heading out, usually about normal stuff like the weather or asking how my classes were going. The thing about working overnight in a morgue is that yes, you're surrounded by dead bodies, but they're in refrigerated drawers. You're not actually seeing them unless you're the pathologist. So after the first few weeks, it really did just feel like cleaning any other medical facility, just quieter and colder. But I'm getting off track. Let me tell you about what happened. It was a Tuesday night, early March. I remember because it had snowed earlier that week, and there were still piles of dirty slush in the parking lot. I clocked in at 10:55 p.m., like always, and took the service elevator down to the basement. The elevator in that hospital is old and slow, and it makes this grinding noise that I never quite got used to, but that night it seemed louder than usual. When the doors opened, the hallway lights were flickering. Not in a horror movie way, just that annoying fluorescent flicker that happens when the bulbs are getting old. I made a mental note to tell maintenance about it. I walked down the hallway to the morgue entrance and used my key card to unlock the door. The morgue was cold, as always. They keep it at around 60 degrees even in the main areas, something about maintaining proper conditions. I could see my breath slightly as I walked in and flipped on all the lights. Dr. Chen had left me a note on the desk in the office, which she did sometimes. It said, "Marcus, we had 4 admissions today. Please be extra careful with the floors in the exam room. Had a difficult case. Thanks, JC." 4 admissions wasn't unusual. This was a big hospital, and people died every day. I grabbed my cleaning cart from the storage room and started with the office, like I always did. I worked my way through the routine, wiping down surfaces, emptying trash cans, organizing supplies. Everything was normal. It took me about an hour to finish the office and the storage room. Then I moved to the examination room. This was always the part of the job that required the most attention. Dr. Chen wasn't kidding about the floors. There were some stains that took a lot of scrubbing, and I won't go into detail about what they were, but you can probably imagine. I put on my heavy-duty gloves and got to work. I'd been scrubbing for maybe 20 minutes when I heard it. A sound coming from the refrigeration unit. It was a low, creaking sound, like metal expanding or contracting. I paused and listened. The refrigeration unit is basically a wall of large drawers, each one big enough to hold a body. There are 24 drawers total, arranged in a grid, 4 across and 6 high. The creaking happened again, and I realized it was probably just the cooling system. Old building, old equipment, made sense. I went back to scrubbing the floor, but then I heard something else. A thud. not loud, but distinct. It came from the refrigeration unit again, specifically from one of the drawers on the left side, middle row. I stood up, my heart beating a little faster now. I stared at the drawers. Nothing moved. I told myself it was just the building settling or the refrigeration system doing its thing. Old hospitals make weird noises all the time. But here's the thing that made me uneasy. In the 2 years I'd worked there, I'd never heard sounds like that from the refrigeration unit. It was always just a steady hum. This was different. I tried to focus on my work, but I kept glancing at the drawers. After another 10 minutes, I decided I was being ridiculous, and I needed to just finish up so I could move on to the next task. I was dumping out my mop water in the utility sink when I heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable. 3 distinct thuds, like someone knocking, from inside one of the drawers. My hands started shaking. I set down the mop bucket and just stood there, staring at the wall of drawers. I knew logically that there had to be an explanation. Maybe something had shifted inside one of the drawers when the refrigeration cycled. Maybe a medical instrument had fallen over. But the knocking had a rhythm to it. 3 evenly spaced thuds. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It was 1:47 a.m. I was alone in the basement of a hospital with 4 dead bodies, and I'd just heard what sounded like knocking from inside their storage area. I considered calling security, but what would I even say? I heard a noise. They'd probably think I was crazy. I decided I needed to at least check which drawer the sound was coming from. The morgue has a logbook where they record which bodies are in which drawers. I went to the office and found it on Dr. Chen's desk. According to the log, there were indeed 4 bodies currently in storage. Drawer 7 contained a 54-year-old male, cardiac arrest. Drawer 11 contained a 76-year-old female, stroke. Drawer 15 contained a 31-year-old male, car accident. And drawer 19 contained a 68-year-old male, kidney failure. I tried to remember which area of the wall the sound had come from. Left side, middle row. That would be drawers 7 through 12. So either the 54-year-old or the 76-year-old. I walked back into the examination room and approached the refrigeration unit. The wall of drawers looked almost ominous now in the fluorescent light. Each drawer had a small label holder where they'd slide in a card with the deceased person's name and information, but from where I was standing, I couldn't read them. I took a step closer. That's when I noticed something. Drawer 11, which according to the log held the 76-year-old woman, had a small gap. Not much, maybe a quarter of an inch, but it definitely wasn't closed all the way. These drawers are designed to close completely and seal to maintain temperature. Seeing one slightly open made my stomach drop. I stood there for what felt like forever, just staring at that gap. Part of me wanted to just leave it alone, finish my shift, and let Dr. Chen deal with it in the morning. But another part of me knew that if something was wrong with the refrigeration unit, the bodies could be compromised. And that would be a huge problem. I needed to at least check that the drawer was working properly. I approached drawer 11 slowly. My palms were sweating inside my gloves. I reached for the handle, a long metal bar that you pull to open the drawer. I wrapped my fingers around it, the cold metal biting through the latex. I pulled. The drawer slid open smoothly on its rollers, and I found myself looking at a body bag, standard black vinyl, zipped up completely. The bag was lying still, obviously, because it contained a dead person. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Everything looked normal. The drawer appeared to be functioning fine, just hadn't been closed properly. That happened sometimes when people were in a hurry. I was about to push the drawer closed when I noticed something weird. The body bag was positioned slightly off-center in the drawer. Not by much, but enough that it looked like it had shifted. That shouldn't be possible. These body bags are placed carefully, and once they're in the refrigeration unit, they don't move. Unless someone had opened the drawer and moved it. I thought about the knocking sounds. 3 thuds. I looked at the bag again, really looked at it, and that's when I saw it. The zipper. It wasn't fully closed. Just like the drawer itself, there was a small gap, maybe 2 inches, right near the top where the head would be. My heart was pounding now. This wasn't right. Body bags are zipped completely. That's protocol. There's no reason for it to be open, even a little bit. I knew I should just close the drawer and call someone, let them deal with it. But I was frozen, staring at that gap in the zipper. And then I heard breathing. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, raspy breath coming from inside the bag. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my mop bucket. This wasn't possible. The woman in that bag had been dead for over 24 hours. Dr. Chen had done the death examination herself, but I'd heard it. I was sure I'd heard it. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the body bag. In the harsh light, I could see the black vinyl more clearly, and I watched, absolutely terrified, as the bag moved. Just slightly, a small rise and fall, right where the chest would be. I need to pause here and explain something. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a janitor. But even I knew that dead bodies don't breathe. They can make sounds sometimes. I'd learned that in my training. Gas can build up and escape, causing groaning or movement. But this was different. This was rhythmic. This was breathing. I don't know how long I stood there watching that bag move up and down. It couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. And then the breathing stopped. The bag went still, and I heard it again. 3 thuds from inside the bag. Knock, knock, knock. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I bolted out of that examination room, through the office, and into the hallway. I didn't stop until I was at the elevator, jabbing the button repeatedly, praying it would come quickly. The old mechanism groaned to life, and I could hear it slowly descending from somewhere above. It felt like an eternity. I kept looking back down the hallway toward the morgue door, half expecting it to burst open and something to come rushing out. The elevator finally arrived, and I jumped in, hitting the button for the main floor. As the doors closed, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A long, drawn-out scraping sound, like metal on metal, coming from somewhere in the basement. The elevator jerked into motion and started its slow climb up. When I got to the main floor, I immediately went to the security desk. There were 2 guards on duty, an older guy named Frank, who I'd seen around, and a younger woman I didn't recognize. I must have looked absolutely terrified because Frank stood up as soon as he saw me. "Marcus, you okay, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out all jumbled. Something about sounds from the morgue, a body bag moving, breathing that shouldn't be happening. I know I sounded insane. The female guard exchanged a look with Frank, and I could tell they thought I was either pranking them or having some kind of breakdown. But Frank, to his credit, took me seriously. He grabbed his radio and called for backup, then told me to wait there while he went down to check it out. I begged him not to go alone, and he agreed to wait for another guard to arrive. 10 minutes later, there were 3 security guards heading down to the basement, and I was sitting in the break room with a cup of coffee, still shaking. They were gone for about 20 minutes. When Frank came back, he had this weird expression on his face. Not scared, exactly, but definitely unsettled. He sat down across from me and asked me to explain again exactly what I'd seen and heard. So I did, trying to be as detailed and calm as possible. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus, I need you to listen to me carefully." We checked the morgue. All 4 drawers with bodies were closed and sealed. We checked every one. The body in drawer 11 is exactly as it should be, bag zipped completely, no signs of movement. Everything in that morgue is completely normal. I started to protest, to insist that I knew what I'd seen, that the drawer had been open and the bag had been unzipped. But Frank held up his hand. "I believe that you experienced something down there. I'm not calling you a liar, but I'm telling you what we found. which was nothing out of the ordinary. Now it's possible you saw something and then in your panic didn't notice it returned to normal. Or maybe the stress of the job is getting to you. Working overnight in a morgue isn't easy, and sometimes our minds play tricks on us. The young female guard, whose name tag said Rodriguez, added, "We also checked the refrigeration logs. All 4 units have been maintaining proper temperature all night. No malfunctions, no irregularities." I didn't know what to say. I knew what I'd experienced, but I also knew how it sounded. And if they'd gone down there and found everything normal, what did that mean? Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? Frank told me to go home for the night, that they'd finish up the morgue cleaning themselves, and that I should come back tomorrow to talk to my supervisor about what happened. I agreed, grabbed my stuff from my locker and left. I didn't sleep at all that day. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The sounds, the partially open drawer, the unzipped body bag, the breathing, the knocking. It had been real. I was certain it had been real. The next evening, I met with my supervisor, a woman named Patricia. She was sympathetic, but firm. She said that working in the morgue required a certain level of mental resilience, and that it was possible I'd experienced a panic attack or anxiety episode. She suggested I take a few days off, and that when I came back, she'd assign me to a different area of the hospital if I wanted. I took the days off, but I couldn't stop thinking about that night. I did some research online about bodies in morgues, about sounds they can make, about the possibility of someone being pronounced dead when they weren't. I learned about things like Lazarus syndrome, where people appear to come back to life after resuscitation attempts have stopped. But that happens immediately after death, not 24 hours later. And besides, if that woman had somehow still been alive, she would have suffocated in that body bag long before I found her. On my 4th day off, I got a call from Frank, the security guard. He asked if we could meet for coffee, said he had something he wanted to tell me off the record. I agreed, and we met at a diner near the hospital later that afternoon. Frank looked tired when he sat down across from me. He ordered coffee, then leaned in close. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this table." "Understood?" I nodded. "After your incident, I did some digging. Asked around, talked to some people who've worked at County General for a long time. Turns out you're not the first person to report strange things happening in that morgue, specifically with drawer 11 inches. My heart started racing again. Frank continued. "About 7 years ago, before the current morgue staff, there was an incident. A woman was brought in, late 60s, declared dead from a stroke. She was placed in drawer 11. The night janitor at the time, a guy named Dennis, reported hearing sounds from that drawer during his shift. Knocking sounds. He opened it to check, found everything normal, closed it back up. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Dennis reported it to his supervisor, who reported it to hospital administration. They checked the refrigeration unit, found nothing wrong with it. They moved the body to a different drawer, and the sound stopped." "What happened to Dennis?" I asked. "He quit about a month later. Said he couldn't handle working down there anymore. And here's the creepy part. I managed to track him down, gave him a call yesterday, asked him about what he experienced. He told me almost the exact same story you did. Drawer slightly open, body bag unzipped, the breathing, all of it. And when security checked, everything was back to normal, just like with you." I felt vindicated but also deeply unsettled. "So what does it mean? Is the drawer haunted or something?" Frank shrugged. "I don't know, Marcus. I'm not a believer in ghosts or supernatural stuff, but I've worked security in hospitals for 25 years, and I've seen some things I can't explain. Hospitals are places where a lot of people die, often in traumatic circumstances. If there's anywhere that might have some kind of residual energy or whatever you want to call it, it would be a hospital, especially a morgue." "But why drawer 11 specifically?" I asked. "That I couldn't tell you." Dennis said the same thing, though. Asked why that drawer, why that spot. Nobody knew. We talked for a while longer, but Frank didn't have many more answers. He did tell me that he'd filed a report about the pattern of incidents with drawer 11, and that he was recommending the hospital bring in someone to check for carbon monoxide or other environmental factors that might cause hallucinations. But he didn't sound like he really believed that was the cause. When I went back to work, I told Patricia I wanted to transfer to a different department. She understood and found me a position doing general janitorial work on the 4th floor, the cardiology wing. It was busier, more people around, and I worked evening shift instead of overnight. Much better for my mental state, but I couldn't let go of what happened. About 2 months later, I was eating lunch in the cafeteria when I saw Dr. Chen. I hadn't seen her since before the incident, and I'd always felt a little guilty about abandoning the morgue position. She saw me and came over to say hello. We chatted for a few minutes, and then I worked up the courage to ask her about drawer 11. She gave me a strange look. "Why do you ask about that drawer specifically?" So I told her about what I'd experienced and what Frank had told me about Dennis. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long time, stirring her tea. Finally, she spoke. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but since you're not working down there anymore, I suppose it's okay. Drawer 11 has had issues for years, not mechanical issues. The refrigeration works fine, but bodies placed in that drawer tend to shift position between the time they're placed there and when they're removed for autopsy or transport. Small movements, usually. A hand that was at the side will be raised slightly. A head that was facing up will be turned to the side. Things like that." "Why doesn't anyone do something about it?" I asked. "What would we do? Call a priest? Have an exorcism in a hospital morgue? The administration knows about it, but officially, these movements are attributed to normal post-mortem changes. Rigor mortis, muscle relaxation, that sort of thing. Even though we all know that doesn't quite explain it, so we just avoid using drawer 11 when possible. But sometimes, when we have multiple admissions and we need the space, we don't have a choice. The woman in the drawer that night, the one I heard breathing. What happened to her?" Dr. Chen's expression darkened. "She was transferred to the funeral home the next day. Her funeral was last week, actually." "Why?" "Just wondering if there was anything unusual about her case." Dr. Chen hesitated, then said quietly, "She died from a stroke, like the report said. But during the autopsy, I found something odd. There were unusual marks on her wrists and ankles, like ligature marks, but they were old, healed. And there were some other indicators that suggested she might have been restrained at some point in her life, possibly for an extended period. I noted it in the report, but since it wasn't relevant to the cause of death, I didn't pursue it further. Her family didn't mention any history of psychiatric treatment or anything like that." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you think she was trying to tell me something?" Dr. Chen looked at me seriously. "I think that sometimes the dead have stories that don't get told. And sometimes in places like morgues where the boundary between life and death is very real and present, those stories find a way to be heard. I don't know if what you experienced was supernatural or psychological or some combination of both. But I believe you experienced something real, Marcus. And maybe that woman just needed someone to notice." We said goodbye, and I went back to my work. But Dr. Chen's words stayed with me. I started thinking about the woman in drawer 11, about what her life might have been like, about the ligature marks and what they meant. Had she been held captive at some point? Abused? Imprisoned? I'd never know. But somehow, in that cold morgue in the middle of the night, she'd found a way to make her presence known. I still work at County General, but I never go down to the basement if I can help it. Sometimes I see the new night janitor, a quiet guy named Luis, and I wonder if he's experienced anything strange. But I don't ask. Some things are better left alone. The thing that haunts me most isn't the fear I felt that night, or the sounds, or even the breathing. It's the knowing that something happened to that woman during her life. Something terrible, and no one knew or cared enough to ask. Her death certificate says stroke. Her obituary says she died peacefully surrounded by loved ones. But those marks on her wrists told a different story. And for one night, in drawer 11 of a basement morgue, that story demanded to be heard. I just happened to be the one there to hear it. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream about that wall of drawers, about approaching drawer 11, about the zipper slowly opening from the inside. But mostly, I dream about the knocking. 3 thuds, rhythmic and deliberate. And I wonder if she was trying to get out, or if she was trying to tell me to look deeper, to see what everyone else had missed. I'll never know for sure. But I do know this. I believe her. Whatever she was trying to communicate that night, whatever story she was trying to tell, I believe it was real and it was important. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed trying to sleep, I think about all the other bodies that pass through morgues every day, all the other stories that go untold. And I wonder how many of them are knocking, waiting for someone to listen.